Poverty Quinutsulam, which means as one, so we really want to bring communities together around this project. And you'll see some information about the project here on the back table. You'll hear a little bit about, a lot about living wage today, which is a big component around ending poverty everywhere, is having that livable wage enough to make ends meet. So with colonization, we know that Indigenous people are disproportionately living in poverty, and so that territory acknowledgement and recognizing that in our communities is really key to the work that we're doing on this project. So thank you. We have other members from our Poverty Reduction Task Group who are here today as well. And I really want to thank them for their time and attendance and participation in guiding this project. It's a Town of Ladysmith project funded by the provincial government through UBCM, Union of BC Municipalities. And so part of that, we're doing a 4-series of employer seminar series. This is the first one on the costs and benefits of living wage. And we also have some information for you today about the living wage, or wage subsidy through Work BC. So we have our panel of presenters here to talk to both of those things today. So we have the 3 other sessions I'll kind of tag in right now that we're going to be doing. One will be on cultural safety, and we're looking at February 27th for that. So mark that in your calendars, and we'll follow up if you haven't. I think I have everyone's contact details at this point, so I'll be able to follow up on that. We're also looking at doing provincial employment standards, so updates on what some of those standards have been. If you have anything of interest on that topic, because it's quite broad, please do connect with me, because we can contour that based on the interest of you who will hopefully be attending. And then the other session will be on the Together BC provincial poverty reduction strategy. A lot of consultation was done last year about that strategy, and so updates are coming from the province this year. We're really hoping to have Sheila Malcolmson, Minister Sheila Malcolmson, to attend to speak to that. So that's kind of happening behind the scenes as well. So we're hoping for May. And even if the new strategy isn't announced, there's lots of stuff in there for employers to talk about employment opportunities, especially around disability. So yeah, lots of great information on that to share with you as well. So today, we have Anastasia French, who is the Provincial Manager of Living Wage Families BC. She's been managing the Living Wage campaign since June of 2020, which we all know what fun year that was. So exciting time to start a new position. And many of the calculations didn't happen because COVID was crazy, but it's definitely gone up a lot since Anastasia has been on that campaign. So really excited to have her. A decade of experience managing these campaigns and projects that have changed laws and policies in the UK and Canada and raised millions for good causes. So thank you so much for being here. She took the hello today this morning to get to right. And actually was in Golden up until sometime this morning.
I basically did this session yesterday in the other side of these.
So she was practicing. Very yes. We also have George, and I'm going to butcher your last name. So Verlin.
Yeah.
Excellent. Who's a certified living wage employer in our region. And he's with the Canadian Bavarian Millwork and Lumber, so we'll hear a little bit from him on what it's like to be a living wage employer. We have Ryan Watson, who's from Social Planning Cowichan. He's our social researcher. He does our calculation locally for the Cowichan region, so he'll be able to speak to some of the specifics of how we got to the number that we're at. And a little bit of context on why social planning does the calculation. As we know, having a livable wage is very important information to have for all of the social determinants of health and all the things that we see in our poverty strategy. And so we've been doing that since about 2014, I believe, minus the year of COVID. And then we have Erin Green, who is from Ethos and Work BC. And so she's here to share information about the wage subsidy program, which can help the employers get to that livable wage with a subsidy for some of their new hires. So really important work there, and lots of great programs at Work BC. Actually, I've been learning in the last few months more and more about it. So if you have employees with disabilities or you're hiring with disabilities, they have lots of different programs to support people. So be in touch with your Work BC gals, hopefully today as well for lots of different programs that we have. So I will stop talking now. Welcome, thank you all for coming, For you who's new in the room, please come and help yourself to lunch. Welcome, thank you very much for coming. Thanks, Apka, for being here. It's wonderful to see you. We are recording the session today so that folks who couldn't be in the room can hopefully check things out online following the session.
Hello everyone, thank you for that lovely introduction. So yeah, I'm Anastasia, I am Provincial Manager of Living Wage for Families BC, and as Rosalie mentioned, I've been managing the campaign since 2020. And actually you alluded to the pandemic. When I first interviewed for the role, it was just as kind of like, when I booked the interview, it was supposed to be in person, and then everything moved to Zoom. It was all very novel. And then actually they offered me the role, but they didn't want me to start because they thought now is the wrong time to be talking about living wage. Employers across the province are struggling right now. It would be cheeky to say, hey, you should be paying your staff more money when you're closing your doors. But actually what we found was that we doubled the number of living wage employers during the pandemic. And I think that's because there was a realization on the value and importance of the work being done by low-wage workers. And many employers knew that their ticket out of the pandemic was to make sure that their workforce were taken care of and were okay, and we're going to be there for them when they could reopen again. So that's a kind of interesting aside. But I will get on to kind of what the living wage is, a bit of the history of the campaign. So it first emerged very much as a tool or a solution to try and solve child poverty. I believe in 2008, 1 in 4 children in BC were living in poverty, and the reality is it wasn't their fault they were growing up in poverty. It wasn't their parents' fault. Their parents were often working really hard, but they just weren't earning enough money to pay bills. So an organisation called First Call Child Youth Advocacy Society partnered with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives and Community Social Planning Council in Victoria to calculate what the living wage is. They ran workshops with low-wage workers, and they said, what do you spend your monthly budget on? Let's calculate what we think should go into the living wage. And from there, that's kind of where the living wage campaign first emerged. Next. So first of all, what is the living wage? The living wage is the hourly amount that a two-parent household with 2 children need to earn to be able to make ends meet. At the moment, because living wage, so it's calculated using 2 parents, 2 kids, because it came about as that solution to child poverty. At the time, the biggest group of people in poverty were children. Very much aware that now actually things have shifted. Over the past couple of years, there's been some real investments to help families with children, childcare investments, Canada Child Benefit, and the BC Child Opportunity Benefit have really made a difference to parents. And actually now the biggest group of people in poverty are single people without kids. We did draft calculations last year for different family types for the living wage. I'm going to talk through the numbers I'm using today, 2 parents, 2 children, but I just want to say that the living wage for a single person without children is pretty comparable to that of a 2 parent, 2 child household. It's 20 cents higher or lower, depending on where we're talking about in the province. But a living wage for a single parent with 1 child is significantly higher. We are looking maybe this year, next year, to move towards having I think it incorporates the different family types, but one thing we're cautious of is we don't want to have lots of numbers floating around. We don't want to say, hire these people, they're cheap, these people are more expensive. So if we do move towards changing our methodology to have different ones, we need to take all that into account. We want to take it slowly, we want to make sure we're doing it right. But yes, the living wage is a bare bones budget. It covers the cost of food, clothing, housing, childcare. Doesn't include things like paying off debt, saving for retirement, caring for an elderly relative, another family member. We partner with community groups across the province to calculate the living wage. It varies from $20.66 in the Fraser Valley, this is very small for you, sorry, all the way up to $26.25 in the community of Dajingids in Haikwa. And here in the Cowichan Valley, the living wage is $25.20 an hour at the moment. Neighbouring Nanaimo is $22.87. You might want to know what the major difference between the two is. The main thing is that in the Cowichan Valley, we assume that those 2 parents each of them have to own a car. Whereas we assume in Nanaimo that 1 parent can have a car and the other one can get to work using the bus. You might argue that the buses in Nanaimo are not good enough. We need to revisit that, but that's kind of what that difference is between those 2 numbers. Also, when we talk about living wage employers paying a living wage, we do take into account any benefits that employers offer. So that $25.20 an hour, if an employer offers health and dental, actually you're lowering that and you only need to pay $23 an hour. Because we assume that worker then doesn't need to take out their own private healthcare plan, it's covered by the employer. And we have a little calculator on our website to work out the value of those benefits as well. So if you're an employer and you hear that $25.20 number and you're like, my staff are earning nowhere near this, this is too impossible, the first place we start from is, well, actually, how close are you when you take into account the benefits, and then develop that plan to bring staff up to that rate. Next. So kind of the principles behind the living wage, I kind of touched on a bit of it, but the principles is enabling people to have a kind of an adequate but not affluent income. Enough to get by, that they work one full-time job and they can pay for rent and pay for food and then have a bit of time at the end of the week to be able to spend with their family and spend with their community. It's kind of a conservative but we hope reasonable estimate of how much it costs to be able to get by. It promotes social inclusion because we're assuming then by only working one full-time job, you then have your weekends or other 2 days a week to be able to spend with your families and the local community. Supports healthy child development because when kids are growing up in poverty, because their parents are working multiple jobs or are not around or not able to afford to put food on the table, obviously those kids are growing up in poverty. And often, sadly, when kids grow up in poverty, the cycle continues and then they end up growing up in poverty as well. It promotes gender equality because we're assuming that both parents are earning the same amount of money. We're also assuming that both parents are going out to work and that there's childcare available, so mothers aren't dependent on having to stay home. Ensures that people aren't under severe financial stress. And it's a vehicle for promoting different social programs as well. So when we touch on all of the things that go into the living wage and why the living wage is so expensive, actually there's real opportunities to look at different things that can help lower the living wage later on. Next. And I'll hand over to Brian, who can talk a little bit about he calculates the living wage for Cowichan and kind of what goes into it.
So, as Anastasia mentioned, there are quite a few items that go into calculating living wage. These are all the local figures for each category. A lot of these are provided by the campaign, whereas a few of the items I do go out and research in the community to determine some of these costs. Food is a figure that's provided to us by the Canadian Center for Disease Control. They do every other year. I believe they do food costing reports. Clothing, footwear, we have to jump in at that one.
That's the market basket measure that StatsCan put out to say how much people are spending on different items.
Housing, that includes rent. It's a 3-bedroom apartment, including utilities and renter's insurance. That data comes from the CMHC, Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation. So it has a 3-bedroom apartment locally. That is important to note that includes purpose-built rentals, so that includes rental of condos, rentals of basement suites, house rentals, that kind of thing. So that's one small gap that we don't have unfortunately. It also includes a percentage for the moving penalty. The data we have provided to us supposes that the family is living in this dwelling for quite some time, so their rent is stable, whereas if you look at listings right now, amounts are quite high. Somebody's having to move for work or other reasons. They are having to spend more on rent. What's the percentage of the year?
I believe it's 17%. Sure.
17% to sort of make up for the fact that it's sort of a tenuous household situation, and if somebody's forced to move for whatever reason, they're going to have to pay more. Phone and internet was provided by the campaign, I believe, provincially. It's just the cheapest phone we could price, including data. There's now there's 2 phones, one for each parent, including data.
Interestingly, the phone is one of the 2 things that actually went down in the living wage budget this year. A few years ago, the federal government broke up some of those big phone monopolies and actually it's meant that phone contracts are cheaper now than they were a few years ago. So as much as life is getting really expensive, there are a few jewels that are getting a bit more affordable, and phone and internet is one of those.
Transportation, as Anastasia mentioned, is kind of a bit of a sore point in Cowichan. We had some back and forth of what's realistic here for a family, whether one vehicle bus pass is sufficient in this region. we maintain that it's not. And the 2021 census kind of backs us up on that, indicating that I believe it's 0.9% of commuters in the workforce are able to use public transportation to get to work each day. So that it's quite low. There are many areas of our region that are underserved by transit. It's very difficult to find work that will mesh with the transit schedule. So 2 cars are unfortunately required in our region. Having said that, this is a piece that we can use to advocate for better transit coverage. So that it's work like that. Child care.
Yeah, I can do childcare. So childcare is assuming the full year care for a 5-year-old and before and after school care for a 7-year-old. Interestingly, childcare is the other thing that has dramatically gone down. I think it's decreased by nearly 30% since last year, and that's all because of government investments that have really helped reduce the cost of childcare. We made the decision not to actually include $10 a day spaces in our calculation this year, and the rationale for doing that is actually, it's great if you can get access to a $10 a day space, but you have to join the waiting list from before you even meet your partner. So we have included that instead. It's just how much licensed childcare is costing.
We do have 3 licensed or $10 a day childcare facilities in the region, which isn't nearly enough, and it's a lot fewer for doing the larger centers.
I just wanted to ask a question about the childcare. Why did you focus on the out-of-school care costs? Because that's considerably cheaper than full-day daycare, which is under 5. That's the most expensive childcare.
So we have both. We're assuming that we have the living wage family has a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. So we're assuming full day care for the 3-year-old, and then before and after school care for the 7-year-old.
Okay, so it's incredibly low then, if that's what you're looking at, is 1 under 5 and 1 over 5.
Yeah.
If I can find somewhere that offers childcare for that, you're looking at double that.
It's both the amount that your parents pay for childcare minus also the amount that parents get in the affordable childcare credit that lowers the cost of childcare the other side of it. So it's both what the centres are charging and then minus what the families will also get from the government to lower it.
All right, thanks.
Is why it's quite a low. But it's also a figure that has dropped dramatically in the past year. Because there's been childcare fee reductions that have both reduced it incredibly for the under 5-year-old, and then there's also new ones that came in for 3 months of last year for the 7-year-old, so we waited it and did it for 3 months. Thank you.
That's one area I had to do a lot of research myself on. Usually a clinic center helps me out with a great rural resource in their area. But this time I got about 23 centers that were able to contribute to their costs to us and help us around that figure. MSP was included years and years ago now. It's been eliminated, so that's not part of the calculation anymore. Other healthcare, so that includes dental.
Yeah, that's just assuming that a family has taken out a private health insurance plan to pay the pharmacy, dental, the normal kind of stuff in the plan.
Sorry, excuse my ignorance. I couldn't hear what you said about MSP and what that acronym means.
Medical services premium.
Oh,
This provincially, everybody was paying that. When did that go up in 2019?
2020, I think.
Yeah. So that was some savings. That was eliminated. Parent education. This calculation does suppose that a parent is attending some courses at the local university based on cost of February University in American. So it's 2 3-credit courses per year, so 1 per semester. 279 is what we arrived at per month, so that's prorated over the year.
And the reason that we have that little item in the budget is when we first did workshops with workers on what they wanted in the living wage, they told us they wanted a route out of poverty, and their route out of poverty was doing an extra evening class or something like that so they could learn new skills. Equally, if employers offer an education training allowance that they can choose to pursue what they want, then that lowers their living wage by about 50 cents.
And then lastly, other expenses, so that includes things like furniture, household items, birthday gifts, entertainment to a minimal degree, recreation. We didn't have this.
Yeah, that's using the food and clothing as a formula to work out that, but that's basically everything else you might want to spend money on. Whether that's going, I think it's like a small week's vacation camping, or you want a Netflix subscription, or whatever. I mean, every family is different for what they spend their money on, so that's a nice kind of pot that they can choose to spend money on.
Any questions?
I guess what were the big drivers over the prior year? Because it was a big jump from the prior year number to
Yeah.
this current year number. So I'm assuming a lot of that's probably housing related, or
Yeah, so the things that have gone up significantly, the housing is the biggest thing, and then followed by food. And while we saw reductions in childcare and phone and internet, those costs were minimal in comparison to how much housing has gone up. And the living wage in particular over the past 2 years has gone up by nearly $5 an hour, and it's housing that is the real driver of that. And in particular, what Ryan was alluding to there, with families who have to move, if you're living in your place and your landlord is good and you're protected by rent control, your rent is only going up by 2 or 3%. But as soon as you have to move, either because you want to or because you have to, suddenly you're seeing a 17-20% increase in your rent. And we did some analysis of census data to work out specifically what that amount is. Oh, back to you.
What is that total of $6,000?
6,000 a month, and then I think 93,000 a year. And then the other side of it also, which I don't think we're actually going to touch on in the slides, is the amount of goods. So we start by gathering what the costs are, and we work out, so a family needs to get $93,000 a year, and then how much are they paying in tax and how much are they getting from the government benefits, and then after you minus the government benefits, how much do they actually need to receive from their employer. And I think the living wage family gets about $15,000 a year in government benefits here in Crouching, I think. And that's really, a lot of those are targeted for families with kids. So that's why when I said at the beginning, single people's living wage is higher than, it's around the same as 2 parents, 2 kids. A lot of those costs, like childcare, are all aimed at families with children, but they don't get many of those other benefits.
And this is showing how our living wage has risen over the past, since 2014 when social planning started regulating this work, versus being there the minimum wage, which is gone up slightly, but it's being outpaced by the increased living wage still, and still going up. I wish I had numbers ending so I could say exactly what the gap was, but this minimum wage now $16.75. So that's almost $10 gap between the minimum wage and the living wage.
Yeah, and so the living wage it's a transformative idea, right? There's lots of reasons why I'm really, really passionate about it, and I think it's so important. First of all, I mean, it can make an enormous difference in the lives of low-wage workers. There were over 2,000 workers in BC that got a pay increase last year because their living wage employer committed to boost their wages. And for some employers, some workers, that was an extra $2,000 in their pockets at the end of the year. Which, when life is so expensive, that can make a real difference on not having to stress about how they're going to pay for food, how they're going to pay for rent, but also not having to work multiple jobs, which is time they're not spending with families and their kids. The other reason I am so passionate about living wages, it makes employers and everyone part of the solution. I think when you take an issue as complex as poverty, it can be really overwhelming and like, oh God, that's so complicated, I don't even know how I can solve that. And actually it breaks it down, and there's different things that we can all do to help solve and address poverty. For employers, it's making sure that they can try and pay their direct staff and contractor workers a living wage, or at least developing a plan to get there. If it suddenly is too much of a challenge right now, it's, well, what can I do and how can I put myself on that path? As consumers, spending our money in living wage businesses and kind of helping do that. And then also as advocates, advocating for things that both lift wages, whether that's minimum wage policies or municipalities or the provincial government adopting living wage policies, or policies to make life more affordable. What are we going to do to build more affordable housing? How can we address the issue of food unaffordability, childcare, all of those things, better public transportation. We had a better bus network in Crouching Valley, then we wouldn't have to have 2 cars, and that living wage would be lower. And linking into that, it changes how we value public services. I think childcare is a really great example of that. Those childcare changes helped lower the living wage back in 2018, 2019. And I think it puts, when it means that women can go back to work, and it really changes how we view public services and the role they play. Boost the local economy. When low-wage workers have more money, that's more money they can spend in local businesses. And it shifts the way that all of us view low-wage workers. which very much I think started to happen during the pandemic. It suddenly was an appreciation for the valuable role that cleaners and security guards and grocery store workers play in helping to make sure that our society can function. Next. So yeah, we have nearly 400 living wage employers in BC, and I think we have about 9 or 10 in the Crouch Valley, including George, who we're going to hear from in a second. And here's some of their logos. And if you offer any other non-mandatory benefits, as I mentioned, your living wage will be lower. If you are interested today, after this, becoming a living wage employer, it's really, really simple. Well, the hard bit is making sure that you can all your staff are earning a living wage. Once you've done that hard work, the application to become a living wage employer is really simple. If you just Google living wage BC, I want to become a living wage employer, it's like on the website. And there's a really simple form you fill in, and within the next month, you can become a living wage employer. We can give you nice stickers that you can put on your vehicles and in your businesses to kind of promote it, and a plaque as well that you can display. And we also are keen to hear from you on how we can better promote living wage employers across these. Yeah.
A question around your 400, do you know how many of those are not-for-profits?
Yeah, so I would say 20% are non-profits, if not 30% are non-profits. Over 50% of our living wage employers are small businesses with less than 50 staff. That's the vast majority, and then we have about 10 to 20 municipalities who are living wage employers, and non-profits make up a really large, disproportionate chunk of it. I guess because they understand the importance of paying a living wage, why it's important. The hard bit is the other side of it, where their budgets are much tighter, their funding comes from certain sources. I think traditionally, wrongly, there's been a hesitancy to say, hey, we have more money to pay our staff, because they think those staff are going to be driving around Ferraris rather than just being able to pay to get just to get around. But no, and in fact, actually, non-profits were one of the biggest groups we lost last year when the living wage jumped up. Non-profits and food and beverage businesses were the two that really, really struggled with staying and paying those high living wages. I think it might be over to George now.
Thank you for the introduction. So we're Canadian Millwork. We've been in business in the Cowichan Valley, Duncan, and then into Chemainus for over 40 years. It's a family business, and actually I didn't even know that living wage accreditation was a thing about a year ago, until I started working on a grant application, and I was talking to another business owner, and they're like, oh yeah, well, have you heard about the living wage accreditation? And you know, it's really good to be able to put on grant applications. And I was like, okay, well, I'll look into it. And so, you know, I checked out the website, and like I was saying, it's a super easy process, and it's all very nicely laid out. And what we found is that we were actually already a living wage employer, so it made it really easy for us to apply for. And so one of the direct benefits was that I could then, you know, say we are a living wage employer on that particular grant application. There's a far-reaching amount of reasons why we find it extremely beneficial to pay a decent living wage. You know, selfishly, it leads to far less employee turnover, right? And employee turnover is extremely expensive. I was talking, I'm part of a business forum, and one of the other members, he's in the fast food franchise, and he's got it down to costing $8,000 something dollars and something cents every time he has employee turnover, right? But you know, for us, it was, you know, we're specialized in the lumber remanufacturing, and when we have employee turnover, it's extremely, it takes a long time to get employees up to speed on our particular, you know, what we do and the skill sets that we need. And we're a little bit different from everybody else, so we in-house train a lot. And so, you know, we're really proud of the fact that we have many employees that have been with us for 15, 20, one even over 30 years now. So it's extremely helpful when an employee can be happy at work. And it also helps with just recruitment. When we have a job opening, we find that more often than not, it's an employee saying, look, I have this friend, I think they'd be really good. And so, you know, word of mouth hiring is far easier. And again, it can be expensive to, you know, go out and to recruit new employees, hiring, you know, interviews, et cetera, et cetera. So We get that those employees directly from our existing employee pool and their contacts, which is fantastic. And I was saying earlier that when somebody's recommending a friend or somebody, they're not going to recommend a crappy employee because it looks bad on them and they've been with us for a long time. So we find that extremely beneficial, right? So not only with the wage but with a comprehensive benefit package as well. We've been really fortunate and able to retain a lot of employees over a really long time. So it does pay off in the end for us. I know every business is different, but yeah, we're happy to be part of to be a living wage employer, and yeah, we proudly display our plaque. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I know it's really short, but I mean, it's I'm happy to answer. If anybody has any questions about
Yeah, I'm just curious, since you were already paying your living wage, I'm not an employer, and I'm just trying to be prepared for pushback when we talk about these things to potential employers. The number one thing they're going to say is about it's too costly. I'm guessing,
Right.
but I think it's an informed question. So, you were already doing that. I noticed that on the document for the CDP living wage, it talks about other incentives that can also be introduced, and I wonder if you're implementing any of those other incentives, like flexible hours, phone-in policy, free meals, striving to promote from within, and other incentives.
Yeah, I mean it's our type of business is very much it's traditional kind of remanufacturing setting. So it's like we have to be we're producing a good through machinery, right? So it's tough to be really flexible in terms of work from home and kind of all these other things. But we do try on the current benefit side, we try and go above and beyond and do other things that are really helpful. Like for one thing, I talk to a lot of employers and they speak to me. It's like, well, what do you do? I mean, there's the standard, benefits packages that I find really expensive. So we've been creative in terms of working and figuring out better ways of doing things. So like a health spending account, we actually administer internally because any other buddy, they cost at least 10%. So the employees get, dinged in terms of how much room they have. They can spend it on anything medically related. We run it internally so we can be flexible on like, okay, well, this receipt's over 3 months old. That's okay. Or, my kid has orthodontics this year, and I was like, okay, well, you could, increase a benefit that way. Another really cool thing that we looked into and that we're now doing is interest subsidy for employees. So this is mortgage interest subsidy, and not a lot of people know that that's actually, there's a prescribed rate, that can be offered as a tax-free benefit to an employee, right? And not only that, if you're paying some of your employees mortgage interest, they're probably not going to be going anywhere. I think it's a really good benefit that we didn't know much about years ago, and then I kind of got into it. Now I have six employees on it out of 25. Again, we got a percentage of renters, right? And like you saw, cost of living is very expensive. So we encourage any of our employees try and get into the housing market to speak to us, because then we can help with and it actually counts a little bit towards their ability to debt service on a mortgage. So that's something that we do, and it's a little bit out of the box, and it's very helpful, and a lot of kids are really appreciative of it. So I'm sorry I might have meandered a little bit away from your question, but yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
I'm curious, what would be like your lowest entry level employee?
So our lowest level entry employee is like cleanup, right? Just and we do have a 3-month probationary period where we fall actually under the $25, where we start usually at 22 for 3 months, right? And then that's when all the benefits kick in. The employee will get a raise, and then at that point they're above the living wage amount, right? But yeah, I mean it's an entry level position. It can be, I tell you, for a while it was anybody that came with a pulse and showed up, great, right? But it sounds funny, but it was hard, right? We had a really tough time finding people. I mean, I think a lot of businesses were experiencing this. And a year, 2 years ago, right now we're getting a lot more unsolicited resumes over the desk than we were, about a year ago. We were getting nothing. And but yeah, so that would be like an entry level, just an entry level job for sure.
And they're designated just as
Not
cleanup?
not really.
General
It's
labor?
general labor,
Yeah.
right? And then we get busy and there's no time for already on
And
the sheets.
they're shifting.
They're already shifting, right? We're super flexible, so if somebody shows a lot of promise, then they can go up based on their performance, right? We've also before COVID we did utilize Work BC on their wage subsidy program, which was also great, just to get people in the door. And it's nice to have that help in the first 8 weeks, and another 8 weeks. So the first 24 weeks, you get help with a subsidy, which is fantastic. And a lot of those employees actually worked out really well for us. It's good because it's structured. You get a plan and you're working towards improving those employees. Cool. All right.
So
Thanks, everyone.
great. So yes, George has touched on a lot of the stuff already, so I'm going to repeat myself. But it comes as no surprise that paying living wage is good for workers, but it's also good for businesses and local communities as well. For workers, look at how happy they all are. It makes sense, right? But it offers independence and peace of mind. It means that they don't have to work multiple jobs, they're not stressed about how they're going to pay for rent, pay for food. They feel valued and appreciated for the work they do, they feel committed to the organisation, and that's more time that they can spend with their families and in local communities as well. But it's also good for business. No doubt there's obviously a cost for paying higher wages, but actually what we've heard from living wage employers is that there's benefits for them. So last year we asked all of our living wage employers for what are the benefits he found, and 96% of living wage employers found some kind of benefit from being part of the program. The number one reason is it helps organisations live their values. And I think particularly in this kind of high affordability time with poverty on the rise, it helps employers being like, no, we care about our staff, we're committed to them, that's why we're committed to it. But it also, it provides good publicity for the organisation, it helps with recruiting new staff, lowering staff turnover, those figures that George talked about, and increasing staff morale, all of which increases productivity, which makes for a happier and better workforce as well. Next. And it's good for local communities. As many of you who are involved in poverty reduction know, there's often communities who pay the price for poverty through the different social programs, food banks, education needs, employment, all of these things. Unfortunately, it's often communities that pay the price. So if we can reduce the number of people living in poverty because they're earning a living wage, that helps solve that big problem. But also, here's a really interesting one. Research from Goldman Sachs found that when low-wage workers receive a pay increase, they are far more likely to spend that money and spend that money locally than when high-wage workers receive a pay increase. When someone who earns a lot of money gets a pay increase, they may choose to invest that money, go on a big, nice international vacation, all of which is completely fair enough and acceptable to do, I'm not lecturing, but when low-wage workers get a pay increase, they're going to treat themselves to a nice coffee in a local coffee shop or a haircut or something, and then that's more money back into the local economy, strengthening local businesses. Next.
Yes.
Over to you folks for any questions that you have. I appreciate you being asking them all as we go through. Yeah.
Sorry to ask another question. Question about, you mentioned that, currently the biggest demographic in poverty is the singles. Can you drill down on those statistics anymore, like an age group? Is it seniors? Is it young people?
So my understanding is at the moment the number one group is singles that are not seniors. So I'm going to get the age bracket wrong, but something like 20 to 40. I think the biggest group experiencing poverty right now, and then the second biggest group is seniors.
Okay.
Senior poverty is very much on the rise and an issue, and actually it's something that living wage doesn't address, I guess. Although by fixing things like housing affordability and food affordability and stuff like that, that will also help address all poverty very well.
Thanks.
Erin, would you like to talk about the wage?
Sure, yeah, I will. So, one of the main, Work BC offers a lot of programs for employers, but one of the main programs that we offer, which would definitely help address the living wage, is that we have a wage subsidy program. So where Work BC will reimburse employers for up to 6 months, so the 24 weeks, in incremental amounts. And actually, in some situations, especially if an employer is willing to work with people with disabilities and diverse needs, and so on and so forth, that maybe can only work part-time, the reimbursement that Work BC offers back is a higher percentage and potentially for a longer period of time to really kind of support and encourage the onboarding process, that there's less of that kind of risk for employers to kind of maybe let people go who are precariously employed, which is then also going to affect poverty, that kind of stop, start, both for employers as well as for people trying to pay for a living. What that will do is, so it's a really wonderful program. We have businesses who, might have initially started somebody at $19 an hour, but they applied for the wage subsidy program, and then they were able to start people at $24 an hour, which is slightly lower, but then after that kind of probation period, then they're getting their benefits packages, so on and so forth. So, or maybe even start them at higher. The other great thing is that each employer can have up to 10 wage subsidies a year. So there's, the onboarding process and potential for growth in your business, so on and so forth is also there as well, because you can have multiple going at any given time. We have one employer who has done super well scaling their business, growing their business, and probably calculates that they've saved themselves over $50,000 with just accessing and utilizing the wage subsidy program for scaling their business, growing, bringing in new employees, and then being able to also maintain that affordability wage after the wage subsidy is over. So if an employer is willing to work with somebody with diverse needs, whether or not that's very obvious diverse needs, or whether or not that might be invisible barriers, whether or not it's health related, so on and so forth, can be upwards of 85% that you're getting back in those wages for the first little while. If you're hiring someone without those needs, then it starts out at 75% back and then scales down from there. As well as youth, and youth for Work BC qualifies anybody between the ages of 19 and 30. If you're hiring somebody in their mid-20s, there's also the opportunity for kind of that customized wage subsidy program, where you can discuss those higher percentages back again, because that business, like being able to maintain their employees, right, and they stick around longer, and it also allows that time for employees to come on board. Most probation periods are 3 months, and whereas with the wage subsidy program, there's a lot of onboarding, there's a lot of new learning for people coming in, or even whether or not it's just kind of helping individuals transfer their skills from maybe one environment to another. Maybe they were a mechanic and they have, then now, maybe they had cancer and they are now, looking for a different kind of work because they can't maintain that high physical demand in mechanic work, but yet they still have a really valuable skill set to a place where they could transfer those skills and utilize it somewhere else, right? And when you look at two resumes and it might not necessarily look like this person could be qualified for the position, but then, given the wage subsidy program and giving them that chance to transfer those skills a little bit longer is gonna retain them. And yeah, it's a really wonderful program, as well as many other things, but there's lots of packages that you can access and look at for the wage subsidy handbook for 2024 and how you can do that. And also never hesitate to reach out, because we've got all kinds of employer supports, even if, so you can be accessing employer supports around supporting employees with diverse needs, as well as throughout the wage subsidy process. You're getting lots of support from either myself or somebody else, like another employment counselor or my coworker Janelle, who also does that, where we can be coming on board and we can be visiting the work site and talking and helping with some of that communication that often can be a barrier in those early stages of employment and sustain. That's the wage subsidy program. Yeah.
So if I wanted to be a living wage employer, pardon me, would you be flexible in what you would offer for a wage subsidy based on that?
Yeah, so the way that the wage subsidy program works is that it requires it to be a new hire, so they can't already be an existing employee. But yes, so whatever that, it's very open. It's very difficult to not qualify for the wage subsidy program. It's, as long as the individual is a BC resident, can work in BC, and you're an employer that's currently meeting all the criteria for paying your insurance benefits and so on and so forth, then yeah, you're gonna get in. And that agreement is very much a collaborative process for what that 6 months looks like.
My other question is I am a special needs employer, right?
Yeah.
And I get into a catch-22 with my employee in that he can only make so much money.
Yes, and so that's why, exactly, and so that's why we offer the wage subsidy program is primarily, or I shouldn't say primarily, there's two ways of going about it. The 75% reimbursement is for your general people coming in to get hired and can work full-time. That other program where it's more customized around people with diversities and disabilities, then it can be part-time. And so, and same with youth, whether or not they're still in school or going to university and therefore can only work part-time, then that isn't affecting their disability income because they're only working part-time.
Yeah, but he's been with me for 7 years, so how do I help him, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We should help him.
Job share.
Yeah, job share. Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah. But that would be, so currently I don't immediately have the answer to that because right? But bringing on new employees with disabilities and starting them out at that living wage, using the wage subsidy and then not affecting their income. For sure.
But to answer that question, because it's one of those things that it's difficult. We definitely don't want to say it's okay to pay people with disabilities less than people without disabilities. But we're also very mindful that we don't want to take away, when you start paying people more and they cross a certain hours threshold, well, a certain amount of money threshold, then their benefits get taken away. And it is a difficult one. The way when I've worked with employers before on it is talking through whether it's finding that right balance of the number of hours or also how you can be creative with your benefits policy. As George was alluding to, because those things can help mean that that money and benefits isn't taken away from the person with disabilities, but you're not necessarily paying that person less than you would something without.
Right. Okay.
But we can talk through the different solutions and stuff. And some of it is tailored specifically to different businesses and organisations and their specific scenarios.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the wage subsidy program?
Or for any of our.
Or anybody else? But yeah, there's lots of packages. Take them. The application process as an employer is really easy. And it's all in that workbook back there. And, or if you want to take packages and share them, then by all means, please do.
Well, I kind of had a question.
Yeah.
So do you see that, or moving forward, if more businesses, especially small businesses, are enrolling in being a fair living wage employer, will that amount to more kinds of government wage subsidies or other kinds of initiatives? Like, do those departments within government, are they interacting and taking that into consideration as like some kind of bounce back for people that are
at the moment,
doing this?
it's one of those conversations where we're open to looking at exploring new ideas and things like that, how it can work. And I've had businesses say, well, we should have some kind of tax break for being a living wage employer and things like that. All potentially really good ideas that we've not done any kind of exploring of in detail. But there's a provincial election coming up this year, so what can we do to try and encourage more living wage jobs? Looking at how that can be done. Ontario The tourism department in Ontario had a really interesting scheme where they were giving out grants to businesses in the tourism industry to hire living wage jobs, similar to that. But I think it was one of those ones with a really nice idea, because it was the first year of the project, so I think there were a lot of pitfalls that hopefully in year 2 can be worked through for how to kind of overcome it and stuff like that. But yeah, I'd love more of those kind of incentives.
Yeah, you're thinking
Pay
about
living
those
wages,
things,
yeah.
and that's part of what your job is.
It's all really helpful because depending too on how successful these projects are, then the more incentives and the more, I can just see it becoming more successful for everybody all around in the future. It's really tricky right now too, because back to your question, unfortunately you can't fire somebody just to hire them onto the wage subsidy. But that might be tempting, but no, we can't do that. But moving forward, we do have those supports, but yeah, there should, maybe, that's a really good point. I might bring that up.
Sometimes there are things in place in the way things work that hold people down.
Yes, yeah,
Right?
that's exactly, yeah, that's what I was.
The other thing I was thinking of is, and you guys might know about this, is what about Europe, right? So in Europe, I mean, people have their homes that they've had in their family for 50 years or 100 years or whatever. Education's paid for, those sort of things, right? There are certain things, healthcare, housing, and education, that maybe are paid for in a lot of European countries, but yet they're not here. Does anybody ever talk about those sort of things being implemented, or to take some of that heat off of regular everyday people, to make life easier?
Yeah, and that ties into the social programs bit that we were talking about. Kind of childcare is a really great example
Yeah,
of that.
yeah,
And I mean, if you look at the living wages in the US, they're even higher than they are here, because they need to pay for healthcare in a way that, like, sure, we have a small part of the budget which is the private health plan, but that's not the same as all of the healthcare that the state provide. But that's where, I mean, one of the really interesting differences between Europe and Canada, I think, at the moment, is the amount of social housing available. In Europe, 17 to 20% of people live in social housing, whereas in Canada it's less than 5%. And so and I think there's beginning to be more affordable housing being built and that kind of stuff, but we're about 10, 15 years behind where we need to be. But all of that, if we continue with the momentum, it might make a difference. Alas, it's going to take a few years to get there. But you're right, and that's why living wage is really interesting, because it breaks into all of the bits of how we can afford it, and what can government do, what can business do, what can individuals do to kind of help everyone get by. But Switzerland also has one of the highest living wages in the world, so it's not, Europe's not going to
Okay, well, yeah, there you go, right?
Well, it is 1 o'clock, so I know some people have to get back to work, some people have already left, but I want to thank all of our presenters here, Anastasia, Ryan, Aaron, and George, for their amazing feedback and information, the great questions here today. I want to thank the Chamber, Roberta, and Jackie for helping to promote the event. They are co-hosts on the speaker series, on the employer series, so that's really exciting that we're working together on that. Everyone from our Poverty Reduction Task Group, the mayor was here, Councillor Mackay is on our Poverty Reduction Task Group, and she's here as well. I want to thank John and his partner for the delicious lunch. Shout out on social media and take some leftovers, help yourself, there are tarts. Actually, are those Portuguese tarts? Oh my gosh, so good. And yeah, I just really want to thank you so much for coming. This dialogue, we don't have all the answers to poverty, and living wage might be out of reach for some of the employers in our communities, but having this dialogue and seeing how we can get there is really important. I love Anastasia's point that there is a plan on their website where you can actually see, how in 3 years can we get there, and then working out the different kinks within, what makes up the living wage. So really great information. Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.